Alright, this is Madcap Music Review. We're here tonight with Michael Aston from Gene Loves Jezebel. How you doing, brother?
Very well, my friend. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
Weather's lovely, isn't it?
It's not bad considering the last 2 weeks are...
Temperate.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Comfortable. Yeah, it's been horrible.
It's been bad. So going back, listening to your albums from the early days, I've always wondered, was there an influence from some of the earlier Gothic bands like The Cure or Susie and the Banshees or the Sisters of Mercy?
I'd probably say there was probably influence from Patti Smith or Pill.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little from Susie, but mostly in a dramatical sense from that side because she was so theatrical. A little, but not something I think you hear too much musically. So maybe a little, maybe the McGeoch Banshee side a little.
Yeah.
But a lot of it were American, like bands like Talking Heads or Psycho Killers and things like that.
Sure. Remain in Light. That was a good album.
Marquee Moons, Television, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of
but always driven towards the more like the writers who took a little bit of a left or took a different avenue in their writing. Always like that more visceral, living, alive, emotive, dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
So at least from my writing perspective, I think we always approached things on a slightly different way. It wasn't just a straight ahead rock and roll band. We'd avoid like, guitar solos, for example. Or we try to avoid traditional arrangements where you have intros, middle sections, and then choruses. We'd eliminate choruses and eliminate guitar solos and try to look for something a little quirkier, more interesting.
Growing up in Wales, as you did, and before you guys moved to London, I think around 81, what was musically, like as a kid, did you always know that it was music that you wanted to do?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I probably knew I wanted to be a singer when I was probably 9 or 10 years of age,
Really?
I'd sing along to Roger Miller's songs, and my parents would have a lot of country music, and you could probably hear a lot of the country. I worked with a guy called Steve Earle once. I was supposed to make a record with him, and he pointed that out to me that my songwriting style was very country,
Mm-hmm.
Like I always wanted to tell a story, and the story would have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Sure.
Not necessarily in that order.
Right.
But there was always something, a narrative,
Mm.
So, but yeah, I always wanted to be a singer, and I took a curious road. I was married when I was 17. I had a child when I was 17, so that kind of put me back a couple of years. But I eventually, my wife at the time went to St. Martin's School of Art, and that's when I moved to London with my brother. He stayed for a few months, and he went back, and I stayed there and formed bands,
Slavarian.
Yeah, Slavarian.
Well, which is the original name.
In Wales.
Yeah.
But I was working in the steel mill at the time when I came up with that name, which, as you know, is I just love the idea of duality. Plus, it was twins in the band. It was,
Yeah, there's that duality going on.
Canvas, So.
But I've noticed with your writing too, there's always that ambiguity. The deeper meaning. Your lyrics they're quite profound.
Yeah, if you listen to them, they are. Yeah, sometimes.
Were there a lot of writers that also influenced you, like outside of music, as far as
when
your writing approach?
For me, the manifesto was that we should try and be as original as we possibly could. The fact that we had twins in the band, both guys who could sing, both who could write, we already had a head start. So.
What do you think coming up in the 80s, especially in London, there were so many bands just coming out from everywhere. Whether it was the Pet Shop Boys or the Cure still going on, or
it's very competitive. Yeah.
What do you think contributed to you guys breaking through all that?
We couldn't fail. We were essentially pretty good-looking, thin boys.
You said that hunger
who could sing and. We were interesting, we had an angle, that's what you always needed, you still do,
Sure.
But in those days it was ultra competitive, but we had a leg up because we could just walk on stage and we weren't like your average Nelson Brothers, singing enough songs.
Right.
We were these two sexy, crazy, asexual, bisexual, trisexual you didn't know what we were, you know. We were quirky, we were from Wales, we were an interesting Celtic background, Roman Catholic, raised, you know. There was a lot of quite a crazy dynamics within the band, you know.
Yeah, you're a product of the Catholic school system back there too, aren't you?
Yeah, 8 kids. Went to Catholic schools. Didn't learn anything there, but hey, we went to them.
Right, I know, right? I hear you on that.
Which is funny, I'm an atheist, and I married a Catholic, but I got 5 kids now, so, but I'm not Catholic. But it still influences your life, of course. You know. It's undeniable, you know.
And then I think probably one of the ballsiest moves I think maybe ever done, you know, you guys, Immigrant just kind of put you guys in the spotlight, just huge. And then, you know, House of Dolls comes out and you're done. You walk away.
Well, yeah, I did walk away, yeah. Because we'd come to a...
Got a little too poppy for you.
Yeah, we came to a stage where I really thought it was... wasn't valid, it wasn't interesting, it was very oppressive, you know. And Jay was committed to himself and what he was doing, and self-absorbed, you know.
Yeah.
Which a lot of writers are, that's the way it goes, it's not a criticism in itself. But we weren't going in a direction that I felt the band should have been doing. This band, Gene Loves Jezebel, should have been fucking massive, you know.
There'd be no alternative rock without you guys. There'd be no Smashing Pumpkins. There'd be no Jane's Addiction. There'd be.
And they're the better bands, you know. Think of the other bands that became bands like Oasis, who were, in my opinion, non-entities, you know. Beatles parodies, you know.
Well, that's an interesting analogy with Oasis, because when you were watching the Gallagher brothers and everything they were going through, did that kind of remind you of like?
Yeah, but they were wise enough to hold it together, and they recognized each other's role. But I think it worked for them because. Which one's Noel the singer or Liam? I don't even know. The singer in that band doesn't write anything. He just sings the brothers what he writes. Well, Jay and I had more of a problem because we could both write. So, and also I've got a very strong personality, which I'm sure must be difficult for him. Because if I thought something wasn't very good,
you'd be the first to be like, hey,
I think Motion Love's a piece of shit, you know. And that would hurt his feelings. But it was my opinion, but it's purely subjective. I just thought Gene Loves Jezebel had so many possibilities. We had 2 great writers. Both guys could sing. You know, we could have been the Everly Brothers meets the fucking Beatles, you know, in my opinion. Well, there was that much strength in songwriting, you know.
It was like a Lennon-McCarthy relationship. But you were the Lennon and he was more the McCartney.
What people generally don't realise is that Jay and I rarely sang together except live. And live is what people love to see us the most because, you know, Jay always, at the time, could never handle a full show. He needed someone to sing a lot of his parts on records, for example.
So in the studio, it would be totally separate vocal?
I would do my songs, and I would help him and sing along to some of his songs. But generally, if it was one of my songs, it'd be all me, you know. So for him, it was. I don't think he ever wanted to be in a band as the Twins. But of course, he wouldn't have made it without me. So.
Well, the lyrical content
he would never have
changed dramatically when you left.
He had his chance. They pushed me out after House of Dolls and fell flat in their faces, you know. This is why I'm playing the New Wave Bar in Bellflower, which is a wonderful little place. But we went from, when I was in the band, selling out Universal Amphitheatre, playing theatres, and growing.
Yeah, you guys were at the peak.
The day after I left the band, they were playing the Roxy, you know, which is a fine venue.
That's quite a step down from the theatres and the amphitheatres.
To 7,000, you know.
Yeah.
And we were playing theatres everywhere, you know.
Oh, you guys are huge.
And also, I left just before what was called alternative, Jane's Addiction, Chili Peppers, etc.
You're the number 1 college band in '86.
Exactly. So it broke up at the wrong time. What they should have done. I mean, Jay had every right to want to go out on his own.
Sure.
But that's what he should have done.
Right.
You know, go on. You know, if you're so good and so talented, you're going to be fine. You know?
Yeah, do it as a solo enterprise.
So, as it happened, he continued with Gene Loves Jezebel. And for whatever reasons, it didn't work out. Then he got needy and called me back, and kept calling me back until he decided that he didn't want me in the band anymore. And then blah blah blah, it kept going on. You know, so.
without that
But
lyrical
I think the biggest
content.
mistake they ever made, they should have just gone out as Jezebel, which is what I think they really wanted to do. And they could have succeeded or failed on their own terms. And they probably would have done a lot better because they would have been in the company of Warrant and LA Guns and those kind of bands.
The glam bands,
well,
yeah.
the kind of the music they were Jealous is, you know, you could play that along with the Warrant song, you know.
Sure.
My cherry pie and down,
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, very simple chord progressions.
So,
not a lot of content lyrically.
I think they were jumping on a bandwagon, you know.
Well, then in '95, you kind of changed things up a bit with, you know, Why Me, Why This, Why Now?
Right.
Which was a beautiful acoustic album. It was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great bit of me being able to do on my own is that I could write everything I wanted to write. When I was within the confines of Gene Loves Jezebel, it was fine while Ian Hudson was guitar player. But once James came in, and James is a fine guitar player, don't get me wrong, but his style is very straight ahead, clinical, glammy, you know, punk rock glam, you know, Kim Wilde, what do you got, you know?
Kids in America, yeah.
Gene Loves Jezebel became Kids of America, you know, meets, you know.
Was
so
it
we lost our bass. We didn't. They lost our bass, you know. So meanwhile, I went out and did my own things. I made 4 records without, you know, Jane. They're all fine documents, you know. Whatever I did or whatever I do or did have, it's all there in that material, lyrically, vocally, songwriting. It's strong material. You know?
Was it a conscious effort to do that acoustic album? Did you want it all acoustic?
No, I just felt free. I was just free. I met a guitar player, Nick Rossi, a wonderful acoustic guitar player, and asked me if I want to make a record, and I said, sure. With a guy called Gazer X, who's famous, Germs or something like that, the American punk rock, which I know nothing about. And we just sat down and wrote songs. It was wonderful, you know, very liberating. You know.
And then in 2003, Exploding Girls.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Exploding Girl. I mean, writing a song about wife dress.
Right.
That's. Was it hard? Were you thinking about? Were you worried about like what are people going to think?
I mean, that's probably one of my great failings. You know, I'm very honest, outspoken, much often to my detriment. You know, my career, whatever else. But as an artist, I don't see. I mean, that's your duty. You know, to speak. You know,
yeah, exactly.
You know.
Educate people. Speak
But I was
truth.
inspired by her, and when I heard about her story, it just, you know, it transformed my very perception of life. You know, belief and struggle and oppression and courage, you know. I saw it as a really incredibly courageous act, you know. You know, something beyond my perception what any human being could feel so powerfully about, you know. You know, what a potent symbol to explode yourself, you know.
You could have just hopped a plane and went over to
That's a great metaphor for a woman, you know. They're all fucking crazy, you know that.
Right, yeah, true that, yeah.
So, but yeah.
The powerful side of woman, and it can manifest itself in dark ways and sometimes in positive ways and sometimes... But there's always a passion, I suppose, behind it. And I think that's what you were tapping at.
Mm-hmm, definitely, absolutely.
And that's...
I mean, I was obviously not trying to get a song on the radio, you know. But it's a great tune. I mean,
it really is.
If I think one error I made was actually, I could have not given up what the song was about.
Yeah, and well, the album artwork was pretty obvious too.
I gave it away, you know, which I probably should. If I redid it, I wouldn't. I would just put it out there.
Yeah, if you put it out as a single, because you know most people don't bother to pay attention to lyrics. No, don't have any idea.
Walk in beside yourself. Walk in.
They'd probably think, oh,
strength. You got purpose.
They think it was about a party girl.
Yeah, wow, she's hot, Lola.
Yeah, that duality, that ambiguity to your lyrics.
You know. But it's still a great record.
It's a fucking bloody good record. It's amazing. It's really good.
I need to make another one.
You do. So speaking of that, are you in the studio? What are the plans coming up?
I'm meeting people to write with and whatever else, and I've got a number of songs which I should commit. But I've also got a new son. Well, he's going to be 3 in November. Mm-hmm. But I got 5 kids, and my life is completely composed around my family.
Yeah, exactly.
So at this point, you know. So, but I mean, I would only need, if I had the funding, the budget, I could do it, you know.
Right.
But I can't do it like I made the last few records, which is essentially all my time and the kindness of strangers, you know. I can't do that anymore, you know. If I should probably do, what are those sites called where they beg people for money?
Oh, what is that? I know
My
exactly
son is always
what
telling me to do it.
Was it Kickstarter?
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I said, God, I don't know if I can beg people for money.
Right.
It seems so immoral, don't you think?
Yeah, it seems a bit odd, especially,
I mean, I find it hard bumming a cigarette, and I have bummed cigarettes, but even so, you have to make a conscious decision, you know.
Like
make me a record.
Michael Aston, you know, you don't picture you being on Kickstarter.
But I mean, I played a show in Denver. A guy paid for Exploding Girls, you know.
Really?
He's a fan of the band. He walked up to me and said, "Wow, why don't you make a record?" And I said, "Well, I'll make one, but will you pay for it?" He said, "Sure."
And that's how it came about.
Check.
And that's how Exploding Girls came about.
Yep.
Wow.
I made the others with Triple X for $5,000 each. They're nothing. That's paying the band, paying the studio, investing months of your time.
And you've been in the business for so long. Going from the 80s and now, some 30 years later, is it different with the advent of the internet? There's the advantages of getting your music out there more, but then you've got to worry about people taking your music.
It's much harder. And,
was it better back then when you actually had labels that stood behind you and would promote?
My favorite time was when we were independent, which was Situation 2, Beggars Bank, with the early days.
No.
When we made enough money to play and we made enough money to make records, and it was a beautiful experience. You know, you met people who really loved the band, came to see the band, bought the records. We did an in-store in New York. It took 8 hours.
Just to do all the signing and everything?
Yeah. Wow. So, and you'd see that everywhere, you know. We'd have people camping on our doorstep in London, you know. So, but I miss that. I don't think that's possible anymore, you know. Because there's too much yapping, too much talk, too many social things. In the old days, I guess that's what they were. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
The only way you could access an artist or a musician, they're artists, fucking call them musicians.
You'd have to be like a fan club and write them a letter and put a stamp on it. Maybe you get it back, maybe it's like writing a letter to Santa, you don't know.
You'd get hundreds of letters and you'd read them, but they'd be bodies of work.
Yeah.
Now it's just like an email, a text, or can you send this, or blah, blah, blah.
It's a lost art, the letter writing.
But there's a whole...
People are anonymous now on the internet and just go and think they can just say whatever they want and just...
It's horrible. And then you get into discussions with fans. It's just not healthy.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Record Store Day, they do it here in America every April. And vinyl's making a bit of a comeback. Right. It'd be great to see a vinyl come out.
Yeah,
and
we should do that.
Do a little Record Store Day at Amoeba or Fingerprints or something.
All right.
Well, before we cut this off, where's the best way people can find you on the web? They want to find out more about what you're up to, your music.
The website, genelovesjezebel.com, is the best way to go. They can write to the Michael Phillip address on there, which is me, and I'll respond to you. Particularly if you fund a record. There's a Facebook page for Gene Loves Jezebel, but I don't participate, so I'm too opinionated. I'll probably say something which you won't like, and then you'll never buy my record again. I mean, one fan got very upset with me and told me, tore up all my records, ripped all the posters off the wall. I don't like Ted Nugent. What am I going to do? Sorry.
No, I hear you.
So I tend to want to stay away from that, if I can. But for the most part, people are great,
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then next is you're headed off to Florida.
Yeah, we're going to play in a festival in Florida. Then I think we'll be done for the year unless someone's going to book us.
Well, as you said on
Go back down to Brazil or Argentina or Peru would be nice.
As you said in '95, the trade winds. We'll see where that takes you, right?
Yeah. Trade winds are blowing.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Much.
Pleasure to meet you. And Cynthia behind the camera.
Alive and well. Michael Aston.
I got all my hair. Most important thing.
Check him out.
Everything.
Follow him. As great as he was back in the day, maybe even better. Go find out.